Thank you for joining me today. My name is Oluwapelumi Amanda Adeola, and I am joined incredibly today by Lady Hale. I'll tell you a brief story about how this happened, just so you have an idea of how we got here today, because this is not something that happens overnight. I write in my diary every single year what my goals are for the year and what I would like to achieve. And for this year, what I wanted to achieve by the end of this year was to have a one-to-one conversation with Lady Hale. Now, I didn't know how it would happen or whether it would happen. I just had that hope and just kept going through my day and my year and my months as if, it's going to happen. And eventually the opportunity came for me to meet with Lady Hale at an event that we did in October, thanks to Crispin for inviting me to speak. And I plucked up the courage to ask Lady Hale if she would kindly have a sit down with me to answer some of my questions, because this is something that I wanted to do. And of course she said yes. And I'm so delighted to be sitting here with her today, and also to be supported by Trinity Chambers, who are helping with the recording today. So thank you so much, Lady Hale, for giving up your Saturday.
Not at all. It's a delight to be with you.
Thank you. So I have a few questions for you today, just to talk generally about your life, an incredible life that you've lived so far. I have your book with me, which is covered with all sorts of bookmarks, because I've enjoyed reading about your incredible legal career and your journey so far. I've also enjoyed looking at the pictures of your family life in every outfit when you have become, taken a new role. It's just so fascinating. So I thought today we'll just go through some of that, and for you to give us some guidance, advice, and just generally how you got to where you are today. So I'll start with the first question. Looking at your early life, it was incredibly fascinating to read about your parents and your siblings and how you grew up, really. But what I wanted to know is, in your own words, how would you say that this shaped the person that you became and the person that you are today?
Well, I think the major thing was having the huge benefit of a really happy childhood with parents who clearly loved one another deeply. And they loved their children as well, but they loved one another even more. And that was quite something. They were also both teachers. And so, as far as they were concerned, education was what everybody should do.
Yes.
It was taken for granted that they had 3 daughters, that all 3 of us would go to university if we possibly could. And we are talking the late 50s, early 60s here, when only 2.5% of girls went to university. So that was quite an ambition for them to have.
Absolutely.
It wasn't misguided, because we all did go to university and we all did pretty well there. But that is a huge amount. The combination of love, education, and ambition.
Yes. Yes.
And I could add something else to that if I might. But that's only in retrospect. My father died very suddenly at the age of 49 when I was 13. And our mother was devastated, but she was a qualified teacher, and so she picked herself up, dusted her qualifications off, and got herself a job as the head teacher of the local primary school. And that meant that my younger sister and I had the stability of staying in the same community, the same friends, the same school. But it also, I think, showed the benefits of resilience, the benefits of independence, the benefits of having your own qualifications. And I think that just reinforced all the other messages that had come.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I read in your book and I could feel your mother's grief, really, from losing your father. But to then read about how she decided that actually I've got my girls to look after and I need to get up and do something about it was just so empowering. And thank you for sharing that. Your book, it was beautifully written. The second question is, I get asked this all the time: how do I juggle with children and how do I manage to do the things that I do? For you, with having a demanding career and having gone from, taking a judicial role, how did you manage that with the juggling? I know you mentioned in your book that you had nannies, etc. But that still doesn't take away from the fact that you needed to be present for your children. How did you manage that with such a demanding career?
Well, we're talking now in the 70s. My daughter was born in 73, so 70s into 80s. And I had lots of benefits, one of which was that I was at that stage a university lecturer at the University of Manchester. And it's a lot easier to be a university lecturer and working from home, certainly 2 days a week. You can organise your timetable. My daughter is fond of saying that she remembers going to sleep to the sound of my typewriter because I was doing my research and I was doing my writing in the study just down the corridor from where her bedroom was. So that was part of it. I don't know how I would have managed if I'd still been at the bar, but one of the reasons for choosing to concentrate on the academic life rather than the bar was because we thought that would be easier. I had a very supportive husband whose attitude was, well, when I have a child, I'm not going to give up work, so why should you? I think it was a little bit easier in those days to employ somebody to look after the child.
Yes.
I mean, we always did it right, paid tax and national insurance and all of that sort of things. But it was possible to get somebody who would be a nanny full-time nanny during the week. They always went home at weekends, which was good because that meant we couldn't just leave everything to the nanny. That would be awful. And of course, the other thing was only having one. Now, that wasn't a choice. It just is how life was. And I have noticed with other professional women that they can manage with one child, but things get more than twice as difficult once you've got two, and more than 3 times as difficult once you've got 3. So I hugely admire the women who manage to combine a career as a practicing lawyer, whether a solicitor or a barrister, with more than one child, because it will take a lot of work. But of course it can be done as long as you have these supportive partner is helpful, living in the right place is helpful, somewhere which you can actually manage, having the right help, and probably being able to make enough money to afford it all.
Yes. Absolutely.
Difficult without all of those 4 things, I think.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I have 2 children and I know it's difficult to juggle, but what you say about a supportive partner is, we were talking about that earlier on, is very important, and I'm grateful to have mine who will give up his Saturday for me to do what I love to do, which is to talk to you.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to the next question. You are a big advocate of diversity generally, but as women, do you agree with the concept of having it all? And can we really have it all?
I think it's very difficult to have it all, but I don't think we should give up on the aspiration if that's what we want.
Yes.
I'm very against one sort of women telling other sorts of women how they should live their lives, because there are so many different ways. And this is true for men as well. You can concentrate on a career or you can concentrate on the family. You can make various choices as to how you're going to run your life. You can change your life at crucial points. And all of that ought to be there for people to make those choices which are practical and which suit them the best. And if that's what we mean by having it all, fine. If what we mean by having it all is that it is easy to combine a career and family life, it isn't easy. It is very much easier if you have the 4 benefits that we were talking about earlier. And it can be done without. I mean, I know some single parent mothers who have made a success of a career in the law, and I don't know how they manage it, but they have managed it. So nobody should be put off, but neither should anybody feel a failure if it doesn't work out, because that just means it wasn't meant to be, and there'll be something else that will come hopping along.
Absolutely.
To do.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. So there was a lot of firsts for you in your career, including being the first to be appointed to the Law Commission, only woman to be appointed Lord of Appeal in Ordinary in the House of Lords in 2004, President of the Supreme Court. Where would you say your confidence came from?
Oh, I've no idea where that came from. I really don't. I must have been so bloody minded, mustn't I? I think, I mean, I was very lucky. You know, I was good academically. And so what I've always done is look for the next ambition, not have a game plan throughout my life. So when I was at school, I wanted to go to university, preferably Oxford or Cambridge. That happened. When I was at Cambridge and realised I was actually good at law and getting good exam results, I wanted to have the best possible legal career I could have. So I kept my options open by going to Manchester, doing both academic work and qualifying as a barrister. When I decided, for the reasons that I've explained, to concentrate on academic life, well, then I wanted to make the best I possibly could of that. You know, not just sit back and do the minimum. I wanted to do research, to publish, to make my name academically. And everything that I did academically actually led directly or indirectly to a public appointment. So it got me known. And that's what then led, I think, to the various taps on the shoulder to do things, because that's the way the world worked in those days. And of course, when I was appointed to the Law Commission, people said, oh, well, you know, law commissioners become High Court judges. And I said, no, only the barrister member of the Law Commission becomes a High Court judge. The academics go back into academic life. But actually, I think somebody had it in their head from fairly early on when I was in the Law Commission that if I didn't block my copybook too much, maybe I might be another woman to put on the High Court bench, because I was only the 10th woman ever to be a High Court judge. So they were scrabbling around. So, but that was an ambition, you know, that I conceived while I was at the Law Commission. Of course, then I'm in the High Court, and this is wonderful. You know, being a High Court judge is, in the family division, is a wonderful job, but it's a very challenging and stressful job. And I've always liked the law, you know, difficult legal questions. So, you know, the next ambition was to be in the Court of Appeal. So that happens. Then there I am in the Court of Appeal, liking appellate work, liking the variety, the huge number of subjects that you do in the Court of Appeal. So, of course, the next ambition had to be the first woman law lord, hadn't it? Yes. It just had to be. So that's what I mean by, you know, the ambition comes where you are onto the next stage.
Onto the next stage, yes.
I think if you have a game plan right from the start, you do risk a huge amount of disappointment. Whereas if you take things as they come and seize the opportunities as they leap out of the woodwork at you, you get a lot of fun. After all, I could have said no. When they first asked me, would I like to become a part-time assistant recorder? No. And I'd been out of court for 10 years then, and I could have said, oh no, I don't think I'll do that. I think I better concentrate on my academic career, or, oh, that's far too scary a prospect to. And it was a scary prospect. But no, I said, oh, well, yeah.
Why not?
Why not? Let's go for it. Yeah. If it doesn't work out, well, no matter. So.
Yes. Thank you so much. I think that did leap out from the book, how every opportunity came and how you decided that actually, you know what, I'll get on and do it and see how it goes. And that's been really helpful, hence the bookmark in your book, because there are instances for me where I've thought, I can't believe this is happening and I can't do this. And my mind goes back to something you've said and I pick it up and I quickly have a read and I think, actually, I'll do it. And what's going to happen? I can be scared doing it, but I could still do it and hopefully be able to look back and think, wow, I did do it. So thank you for sharing that. So the next one, I often find myself in spaces where I'm the only one of my kind in, you know, certain places. And of course, throughout your career, you've had, as I said, so many firsts. So how did you navigate spaces where you found yourself to be the only woman and being able to use your voice positively? Because, for example, when I looked at some of the pictures in your book, you were the only woman standing there amongst, say, 10, 11 men. How did you make your voice be heard?
Well, I must be a bit of a pushy sort of person. I don't think of myself as pushy, but for some reason, I never found that to be too much of a problem. No doubt it was. No doubt people said things about me behind my back, but they were always very friendly and welcoming to my face. You know, when I first went to Manchester, you know, I was only the second woman full-time member of staff, and they were very friendly and welcoming. They were very friendly and welcoming in Chambers in Manchester. Mm-hmm. They were very friendly and welcoming at the Law Commission, although I was scared rigid of these very, very bright, forceful chaps. But you find that you can actually have a voice because you're doing a job. And so if you concentrate on the job you're doing, then I think you can speak up for the job you're doing. And we found various ways of persuading people. Well, as you know, that's part of the law, isn't it?
That's part of the law. That's right.
The art of persuasion.
So you've mentioned imposter syndrome before, and with the clear advice, again, this is something that you said when we were on a panel together in 2020, you had said the words, "Go for it, girl." How did you manage the feelings of self-doubt and ultimately saying yes to the role after role until obviously your final big role as the President of the Supreme Court?
Well, I certainly did have imposter syndrome. We didn't call it that then. You know, it's a new term for the feeling of lots of people, not only women, but possibly especially women, when they turn up in a new role, wondering whether they are going to be able to cope with it, and then deciding to cope with it. And obviously what you've got to do is give it your best. And what I now say to people, well, somebody thought you could do it, otherwise you wouldn't be there. And if it turns out, having given it your best, it isn't for you, one way or another, it's their fault, not yours. And that's a good way of looking at it, because I think one has to take new challenges thinking, well, maybe it won't work out, but I will do my absolute utmost and see whether it does. I think when I first started judging, that was the thing I was most bothered about. I thought I could do the Law Commission because it was an extension of the academic work I'd been doing. I thought I could do the teaching and the research, but I think the judging was where I was most unsure about whether I could do it. So,
and you did.
Turned out all right in the end. Eventually, yes.
So have you ever been told then that there are things that you could or could not do as a woman? And how did you manage those negative narratives? If you're minded to give an example, that would be great.
Well, I wish I could, because I don't remember being told there were things I couldn't do. What I do remember, because we're going back to the 50s and early 60s when I was at school, that there was still quite a view that you had to choose between having a career and having a family. It was not thought that you could combine the two, or certainly not that you could combine them seriously. You know, having a full-time career and being a mother and wife and so on. And I don't think anybody ever told me you couldn't do that. And obviously I discovered that you could do it. But I think that was probably the most difficult thing that I grew up with. I don't remember anybody telling me you couldn't be a lawyer, which obviously might have happened. In fact, much to my surprise, the head teacher at my school wanted me to get to Oxford or Cambridge. My best subject was history. My favourite subject was history, but she was a historian. And she said to me, "Brenda, I don't think you're a natural historian. What else might you study?" And when I came up with law, because I was interested in it, she didn't say, "Nonsense, girls don't do law," which was true in those days. She didn't say that, which is very surprising because she had quite streamlined ideas about what her girls would do. She said, "That's a good idea. There's nothing we can do to help you, but we're certainly not going to stand in your way." And so, unlike a lot of girls, I think, who get told, "No, you can't be a lawyer." And also, I was never told you couldn't be a barrister either. There weren't a lot of women at the bar. There were very, very few women at the bar. But it was part of being in a place like Cambridge, where there are all these men. A lot of them very entitled men, really irritating. You know the particular type. They're not as common as they used to be. No. They're nothing like as common as they used to be, but there used to be this particular type of public school boy who had taken it for granted, you know, that they would go to Oxford or Cambridge and they would then get whatever job they wanted in London. And that included, and a lot of the lawyers, therefore, of that sort were going to go to the bar. And I'm afraid I thought, well, if you can do it, maybe I can too. So I think some of the off-putting things just turn into challenges, don't they?
Yes, they do. Thank you. So you've been very vocal about your views on the lack of diversity in the judiciary, especially for women. There's been some changes with the new Lady Chief Justice being appointed. Has your views changed? Are we getting there, or do we have more work to do? And what are your recommendations as to how we can bridge that gap?
The last of those is the most difficult. We have done really pretty well in advancing women in the judiciary. We've now got as many as a third in the High Court and Court of Appeal, 40% in the district bench and the circuit bench, those sorts of figures. So that's pretty impressive. It's not inconceivable that we'll get to half and half. But I don't mind. I mean, I think 40-60 either way is perfectly acceptable. And you know, having had a woman president of the Supreme Court, which is the top judicial job in the whole United Kingdom, and now having a Lady Chief Justice, not only in England and Wales, but also in Northern Ireland.
Yes, of course.
So they were first. And so it's been shown that women can do the top job. So I'm not saying that the job is done.
Yes.
But it's certainly a great deal better than it was. And that was simply, in a way, by people realising that there was a problem and maybe something had better be done about it. And having an open and transparent merit-based appointment system does make a big difference. Because although I benefited from the tap on the shoulder system, the people who benefited from it were the people who were visible.
Yes.
You know, the powers that be had to know what shoulders there were available to tap. Whereas if you have an application-based system, well, then people can put themselves forward that people wouldn't have thought of. And then suddenly the penny drops. Oh, yes, that person's got real potential. And so that's important. I'm not saying that the process is perfect. Very few appointments processes are perfect. And there's clearly a big job to be done in ethnic minorities. And of course, it varies from minority to minority. The issue is not done any good by just calling everybody BAME.
That's right.
Because on the whole, the proportion of people of South Asian heritage in the judiciary has been rising reasonably steadily. And it's probably still out of proportion, but it's not that much out of proportion to the general population. Whereas the people of black, whether it's African or African Caribbean heritage, that has stayed the same for the last 10 years. And it is abysmally low. It's something like 1%.
That's right.
And that is something that definitely needs looking at, because it does. I mean, there are lots and lots of able people of that heritage in the law.
That's right. Yes.
It's not a shortage of people. So we have to look at, you know, what are either the barriers to the best people applying or the barriers to the best people being appointed. I hope that the Judicial Appointments Commission is doing some work on that, because it's a really serious problem. And it's a particularly serious problem because that community is overrepresented in the criminal justice system, at the wrong end of the criminal justice system.
That's right.
And who knows, I'm not an expert, but it's not impossible that the same sorts of assumptions and judgments lead to that overrepresentation as lead to the underrepresentation.
Yes.
So it needs to be thought about, looked at, and studied. I'm a great believer in counting. You know, you have to count before you know there's a problem or not.
Absolutely.
If we weren't counting, we wouldn't know that we haven't done any better for the last 10 years,
That's
for
right.
example. But I'm also a great believer in trying to study the problem.
It's trying to find a solution, because it's all well and good that we have the data that shows that this is the difficulty, but what exactly is happening to redress the balance? So thank you. So you have an impressive collection of brooches. You've got a nice one on today. Is that a frog? Is that a toad?
It's a frog, yes. It's a frog. Yes,
Right.
I believe it's a frog.
You've
got a very beautiful brooch.
I'm now into brooches myself due to my affiliation with you. I know everybody thinks we're best friends, but yeah, I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. I've got my lovely ballerina on, thanks to my daughter. It's actually started a trend, and your brooches are now, they have a life of their own. There's actually a hashtag. I don't know if you know about this. There's a hashtag online. Lady Hale brooches. Yes.
Okay.
There is.
Yes.
It's trending.
Well,
so
I don't do Twitter / X, so I wouldn't know.
So you've shared your love for brooches and how this started. And do you mind sharing that again for me, please? And if you can, for one of my colleagues who really desperately wants to know, this one's for Katie. She wanted to know which one is your favourite.
Oh, that's tricky. The favourite is really difficult because it tends to be the one I've got on at the moment, because I try and choose a brooch that matches or fits well in the garment that I'm wearing. The whole thing started when I was in the family division. We weren't wearing robes because we were sitting in private most of the time. So I was wearing dark suits. I hate suits. But they had to be either black or dark grey or navy or whatever. Really boring. Mm-hmm. And my husband started giving me brooches just to lighten things a bit, because there's nothing wrong in family work in trying to lighten and brighten the atmosphere in what is a very fraught emotional situation. So we're not making fun of anything, but we're just lifting it a little bit. The odd smile helps as well. And so that's how the brooches started. And actually the very first one was a spider. Uh-huh. But it wasn't the spider.
Not the spider.
It was a very discreet antique silver spider, and I still have that. And then, of course, it all just blossomed. And now, of course, loads of people give me brooches. I was in Norway last week, and they gave me a brooch as a thank you for the lecture that I had given. And it was made by the Sami people of Norway, who are the indigenous people in Norway. And it's slightly abstract, but basically it looks like a Viking longboat, wow, with the sort of bird-type head or dragon-type head that they have. And that was to symbolise, they thought, the Vikings crossing the North Sea to come to the north of England. Because that sort of thing happens, and it's so delightful. So probably the favourite brooch is either the one I'm wearing or the most recent one I've been given. So maybe my Norwegian brooch is currently my favourite.
Thank you. So coming towards the end of our questioning then, what advice would you give to the next generation of lawyers who also want to have a career and a family without having to choose between the two?
Well, all the things that I have said in the course of this conversation, really. Go into things with an open mind. Don't be too fixed about what it is you're going to do, but expect that you will be able to do both, because it is undoubtedly possible. You are testament to that. I'm for a different generation, but also testament to that. So it usually is possible to do it. But I think the most thing is to enjoy what it is that you're doing. Find something that you enjoy. I mean, the law is a wonderful profession and a wonderful subject, but there are aspects which are boring and tedious and so on. But there are people who like the things that you and I might think were boring and tedious.
That's right.
So it's got something for everybody. And there are lots of different ways of practicing and using law as well. Loads of different sorts of law jobs around. So make sure you find something that you enjoy doing. Take all the opportunities that come your way, even if they're a bit scary, because that's going to be the way of testing yourself to find out what's the best you can be. And the end is always to try and be the best you can be, isn't it?
That's right, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you had to do it all over again, Would you change anything?
No. No, I've thought about this,
Yeah.
from time to time. Of course, not everything is under one's own control.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Now, I've had a lot of benefit of being in the right place at the right time. Absolutely no doubt about that. Being a reasonably capable woman at a time when there were jobs that women hadn't done, but there were people who thought we ought to have more women around doing them. This was particularly true of the civil servants in the Lord Chancellor's department, as it then was. Yes. And so it wasn't a disadvantage starting out in a judicial career to be a woman. It wasn't a disadvantage thinking of becoming a law reformer to be a woman. Wasn't a disadvantage to be in the Court of Appeal thinking of wanting to go into the top court in the country, because they were beginning to think, we're going into the next century and we still haven't had a woman. So, so you have to make the most of the benefits of your situation, as well as not being too downcast by the disadvantages.
Thank you. And finally.
She said finally a few times earlier, didn't
finally
you?
Now, what is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Oh, now that's very, here am I dishing out all sorts of advice to people because people ask me to, I'm not there gratuitously giving people advice, but I can't really remember what advice I was given. Maybe the best was actually that headmistress who said, I don't think you're a natural historian. What else could you study? Yeah. Because without her having said that, I would have applied to read history at Oxford or Cambridge. I think I'd have got in, but I don't think I would have been the success that I have been, and I certainly wouldn't have had the same career that I've had if I hadn't somehow popped up with, what about law?
Wow, it's been an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful to you again for your time. I have learned so much, and I'm sure that everybody who is watching us will also have picked up a gem or two. In Lady Hale's words, you have to go for it, and I'm so thankful that I did go for it by asking her and also chasing her by email. So thank you so much for giving up your time, and I'm ever so grateful.
Not at all. It's a real pleasure talking to you, as always. Enthusiasm, you see. Maybe we should have said that, shouldn't we?
Yes, we should.
Communicated enthusiasm is a really important characteristic to have.
Thank you very much.